They sold her furniture, her car, and her home. They forgot about the boat. 72 years old, with a checking account holding exactly $114 and a 900-ton ferry rusting in a gravel lot on the coast of Maine. What she found. Ruth Calloway crouches in the dim below-deck corridor, her hand flat against a heavy steel door with a rusted padlock. The metal is cold enough to ache. White stenciled letters read, "Cabin 7, authorized crew only." And the padlock? That's the thing. That padlock is not original hardware. Somebody put it there after this ferry stopped running. Somebody locked something away on purpose. But we're getting ahead of ourselves. Let me take you back 3 weeks. Here's what Kevin and Marge Calloway did to their own mother. While Ruth was recovering from pneumonia at a rehabilitation facility in Bangor, still on oxygen, still unable to walk to the bathroom without a nurse's arm, her son and daughter obtained a power of attorney. Hastily, the lawyer would later note. Aggressively, a judge might say if one ever bothered to look. Kevin, 44 years old, sandy brown hair side-parted and receding at the temples, that slim black leather portfolio always tucked under his left arm like it made him someone. And Marge, 41, dark auburn hair blown straight, thin gold wireframe glasses, cream leather handbag with brass clasps gripped in her right hand like a weapon she was always ready to swing. These two walked into a lawyer's office, signed some papers, and sold their mother's life out from under her. The house in Brewer, gone. 31 years of mortgage payments, gone to a cash buyer for $189,000. Her furniture, the dining table Walter built, the rocker that was her grandmother's, auctioned. Her car, a 2011 Subaru Outback with 94,000 miles, sold for $6,200. Her savings accounts, emptied. Total proceeds across everything, $341,000. Ruth's share after Kevin and Marge deducted their quote-unquote expenses? $114 in a checking account, and a 900-ton decommissioned ferry called the MV Clara Dawn, beached in a gravel lot in Port Harlan, Maine, since 1998. Kevin told her it was for her own good, said those exact words, standing in the rehab facility hallway, portfolio under his arm, not even sitting down. "This was for your own good, Mom. You can't manage all that anymore." Then he adjusted his cuff and walked out. For her own good. Yeah, that's what people say when they've already spent the money. The ferry was the one thing they couldn't unload. No buyer. No scrap value worth the environmental cleanup cost. Listed on the county tax rolls as a non-navigable structural asset, which is bureaucratic poetry for a thing nobody wants. Walter had bought it in 2003 for $1,200 at a maritime surplus auction. Nobody ever asked why. Ruth's name was on the deed because Walter put it there before he died, and Kevin and Marge left it alone because they couldn't figure out how to make a dollar off it. So that's what Ruth Calloway had left. A dead ferry and $114. She arrived in Port Harlan by Greyhound, stepped off the bus at the gas station that doubled as a depot, one canvas duffel bag over her shoulder. Inside that bag, 3 changes of clothes, a toiletry kit, and a photograph of Walter tucked into the inside pocket so it wouldn't bend. Around her neck, resting against the cream cotton of her Henley under the faded olive-green field jacket, hung a tarnished brass compass on a thin brown leather cord. Walter gave it to her on their 25th anniversary. She touched it once, briefly, when she saw the ferry for the first time. 186 feet long, white paint gone to rust and gray primer. The name Clara Dawn, still legible in faded black letters across the stern, though the sea had mostly surrendered to weather. She hadn't seen it in 4 years. It looked worse. It looked like something the ocean had chewed on and spit into a gravel lot to die. Ruth walked up the gangway with her measured, deliberate stride. Upright, hands at her sides, every step chosen. The gangway groaned under even her slim frame. The main deck was open to weather. Leaves had piled in the corners. Bird droppings streaked the railings. Pooled rainwater sat in the depressions of the non-skid plating, black and still. But below deck was different. The passenger cabin was intact, rows of bolted bench seats, scuffed but solid. A galley kitchen with a propane stove that clicked dead twice before catching on the third try with a blue whomp that smelled faintly of rust and gas. A captain's quarters at the end of a narrow corridor where a cot with a wool blanket waited, smelling of diesel and salt and years of nothing. She set Walter's photograph on the shelf above the cot. She filled a pot with water from a jug she'd bought at the gas station, $3.49. She boiled it on the stove. She drank instant coffee from a tin mug she found in the galley cabinet, and the coffee tasted like dust, but it was hot, and it was hers. This was home now. So, here's where we are. A 72-year-old woman with $110.51 after the bus ticket and the water jug, living alone on a dead ferry in a gravel lot in coastal Maine in October. Her children took everything and left her the one thing nobody wanted. And if that were the whole story, it would be sad enough. But it's not the whole story. It's not even close. That evening, Ruth pulled a flashlight off a hook by the galley. Dead batteries. She walked back to the gas station. $4.99 for a pack of D-cells, $105.52 left. She did the math in her head on the walk back, the way she always did, the way you do when every dollar is a decision. Below deck, the flashlight beam cut through corridors that smelled of old grease and standing water. The main vehicle deck was vast and empty, oil-stained concrete stretching into darkness. The crew quarters held 4 narrow berths, stripped to bare mattress ticking. The engine room was a cathedral of seized diesel engines, massive and silent, the smell of old grease and rust thick enough to taste. And then, at the end of a corridor on the lowest deck, past a bulkhead door she had to put her shoulder into, she found it. A second door, steel, padlocked, that white stencil, Cabin 7, authorized crew only. The padlock was brushed steel, not maritime brass, newer. Someone had come aboard after the Clara Dawn stopped running and locked this door shut. Ruth pressed her palm flat against the cold metal. She stood there for a long time. Then she climbed back up. The upper deck at dusk. The harbor stretched out gray and still, the last light catching the water in flat silver sheets. Ruth stood at the rail, the compass resting against her collar, her white silver hair loose strands catching the wind around the tortoiseshell clip. And behind her, from the shadows of the companionway, she heard something move. A low exhale, the click of claws on metal decking. Something was already living aboard. Ruth turned slowly in the dusk light on the upper deck and saw him. A large old German shepherd mix stood at the top of the companionway stairs, watching her, gray-muzzled, ribs visible under a dull coat gone silver around the chest and face. One ear stood upright, the other folded forward at the tip like it had given up on formality a long time ago. He didn't bark, didn't growl, didn't approach. He just sat there at the top of those metal stairs and looked at her with steady brown eyes that said, "I've been here. Where have you been?" Ruth didn't move toward him. She'd learned that lesson a long time ago. You don't reach for things that have been alone too long. You let them decide. She lowered herself to the deck, 6 feet away, her faded olive field jacket spreading on the cold steel beneath her. She opened a pack of saltine crackers, $1.25 from the gas station in town, which left her at $104.27, and set 2 crackers on the deck between them. Then she put her hands in her lap. The tarnished brass compass shifted against her collar as she settled. She didn't speak. 11 minutes. That's how long it took. 11 minutes of the harbor wind and the creak of old rigging somewhere down the dock, and the sound of his breathing, slow and measured, like a man deciding whether to trust a contract. Then he stood, walked 3 steps, and ate the crackers off the deck. Didn't look at her while he chewed, went back to his spot. 20 minutes after that, he lay down. By midnight, he was sleeping across the threshold of the captain's quarters, his big gray body blocking the doorway like he'd been assigned the post. Ruth stepped over him carefully to get inside. He didn't flinch. He chose her before any human did. Remember that. The next morning, a rust-orange 1994 Ford F-250 with a welding rig in the bed pulled up to the base of the gangway. The engine ticked as it cooled. A broad-shouldered man climbed out, stocky, about 5'10", steel gray hair cropped short and thinning on top. Dark brown eyes sat deep beneath heavy salt-and-pepper brows. Tortoiseshell half-moon reading glasses hung on a beaded chain around his neck. A red cotton bandana was folded in his left back pocket. He stood at the bottom of the gangway in a dark navy wool work shirt with the sleeves rolled over a white undershirt and looked up at the ferry like a man visiting a grave. "You Ruth? Walt's wife?" He didn't come aboard until she nodded. Even then, he waited for her to step aside, a gesture so old-fashioned it almost hurt. He carried a canvas bag up the gangway, a socket set, a pipe wrench, a thermos of black coffee, and a brown paper bag with 2 ham sandwiches. He set them on the galley counter without ceremony, didn't arrange them, didn't present them, just put them down the way you put down tools you expect someone to pick up. Ruth asked who he was. "Dale Pruitt. I kept this boat running for your husband for 11 years. He never told you about me because that's how Walt was about the things that mattered." That sentence landed like an anchor dropping. Dale told her what he knew, and what he didn't. Walter bought the Clara Dawn in 2003 for $1,200, told Dale he had plans for it, drove 5 hours from Bangor every few weeks for years, sometimes staying 2 days, sometimes 4. He worked on the ferry alone, mostly below deck. Dale helped with the mechanical work, pumps, generators, wiring. Walter paid him in cash, always fair, never once explained what he was doing in cabin 7. Dale never asked. Walt was private the way the ocean is wet. You didn't question it. You just respected it. Walter stopped coming in 2019, the year he got sick. He died in 2021. Dale kept checking on the ferry, fed the stray dog that showed up in 2020, named him Dutch after a photograph he found taped to the wheelhouse dash, a man in a merchant marine uniform with the word Dutch written on the back in faded pencil. The dog lifted his head at the name, then put it back down. Ruth asked about cabin 7, the padlocked one, the one with the steel door that didn't match the rest of the ferry. Dale pushed his reading glasses up his forehead. He said one thing. He said, "If something happens to me, make sure Ruth finds this boat before anyone else does." I figured he'd told you. When I heard what your kids did, I drove up here the same day. Walter anticipated the betrayal, or at least the possibility. He knew his own children well enough to plan around them. "Let that sit with you for a second." Dale offered to cut the padlock. Ruth hesitated, asked if Walter ever said anything about what was inside. Dale shook his head. So Ruth decided to open cabin 7 herself. Dale loaned her a cutting torch and showed her how to light it. The angle, the distance, the way the flame should look when it was ready. He did not stay to watch. He drove away. His taillights disappeared down the harbor road, and the sound of his engine faded into the pines. And then it was just Ruth and Dutch, and the hiss of the torch. She cut the padlock. It fell to the deck with a sound like a period at the end of a sentence. The steel door swung inward on greased hinges. Someone had maintained these hinges. Someone had come back and oiled them and kept them ready for this exact moment. Inside, a cabin roughly 12 by 16 feet, insulated with ship's foam, dry, temperature stable. A workbench along one wall, a filing cabinet, a shelf of journals, 18 leather-bound composition books, numbered 1 through 18. A maritime logbook, a stack of sealed manila envelopes, a corkboard on the wall covered in photographs, letters, and hand-drawn charts. The air smelled of cedar and linseed oil and old paper, and something faintly like dried lavender. And on the workbench, in a wooden frame, a photograph of Ruth, age 30, standing on a ferry dock, laughing, her hair still dark, the brass compass around her neck. Walter took that photograph on their honeymoon, 42 years ago. Her hand went to her throat. The compass was still there, cold against her fingers. Ruth sat on the cabin floor. Dutch lay across the doorway, his breathing slow and steady. She opened the first journal, Walter's handwriting, the same cramped lefty script she'd read on grocery lists for 40 years. The first entry was dated March 2003. Bought the Clara Dawn today, $1,200. Ruth would kill me. But this is the only vessel registered in the state that meets the tonnage requirement for the Maritime Trust provision. If I'm right about the statutes, this boat is worth more sitting still than it ever was moving. She didn't understand yet, but she turned pages. The flashlight trembled slightly in her hand. Dutch's breathing was the only sound in the sealed cabin. And then she stopped, because the handwriting had changed. Someone else wrote in Walter's journal, and the date was 3 years after Walter died. The handwriting is smaller, neater, written in blue ballpoint where Walter used black. The entry reads, "Ruth, if you're reading this, I kept my promise. Everything is in the filing cabinet. Start with the green folder, HP." Ruth traces the initials with her fingertip. HP. She doesn't recognize them. Not a friend she remembers, not a name Walter mentioned over dinner, not a signature on any Christmas card she ever opened. But whoever HP is, they were aboard this boat. They sat in this chair, or one close to it, and they wrote in Walter's journal 3 years after Walter was in the ground. They knew about this cabin, they knew about this journal, and they knew Ruth would come. The filing cabinet stands against the starboard bulkhead, olive green steel, 4 drawers, the kind you'd find in a school principal's office in 1986. It's bolted to the deck with L brackets, which means Walter didn't want it sliding in rough weather, which means Walter expected the boat to move, or at least expected it to still be here long enough that it mattered. Ruth pulls the top drawer. It resists, then gives with a sound like tearing paper. Inside, a green hanging folder, tabbed in Walter's handwriting, Maritime Trust, Clara Dawn. She lifts it out. It's heavy. Not book heavy, consequence heavy. The kind of weight that comes from notarized seals and witnessed signatures and 15 years of someone doing something nobody asked them to do. Inside, a stack of legal documents, typed, notarized, dated between 2004 and 2019. Walter had been filing paperwork with the Maine Maritime Heritage Commission for a decade and a half, systematically, methodically, one form at a time, one fee at a time, one certified letter at a time. Under an obscure 1971 Maine Maritime Preservation Statute, any vessel of historical significance, built before 1970, over 500 gross tons, with documented service records, could be designated a heritage maritime asset. Once designated, the vessel and its permanent berth become eligible for a federal preservation trust, a fund that accrues interest as long as the vessel remains intact and in the custody of a named beneficiary. Walter filed the Clara Dawn's application in 2004. It was approved in 2007. The trust has been accruing since. The current matured value, printed on the most recent quarterly statement tucked at the back of the folder, dated 11 months ago, $327,412. 31. Ruth doesn't cry. She presses the heel of her hand against her pale, gray-blue eyes until the pressure steadies her. She reads the number again, $327,412.31. She has $104.27 in her checking account. The last time she checked, 2 days ago at the Walgreens on Route 1, where the ATM doesn't charge a fee, the number made her throat close. The trust is in her name. It has always been in her name. Walter set it up so the money could only be accessed by the vessel's registered owner, Ruth, and only if the vessel remained intact. If the ferry were scrapped, sold, or moved from its designated berth, the trust dissolved. Every penny gone, returned to the Federal Preservation Fund like it never existed. The boat was never worthless. The boat was the lock. Ruth was the key. So let me make sure you're following this. Her children, Kevin with his charcoal overcoat and his slim black leather portfolio, Marge with her cream blazer and her brass-clasped handbag, sold her house, her car, her furniture. Everything they could get power of attorney to touch. And the one thing they couldn't sell, the one thing too big and too rusted and too stubborn to move from its berth, was the only thing that was actually worth anything. $327,412.31. And Walter knew. He knew before he died that his children might try to strip her bare, so he built a boat-shaped fortress around the one thing they could never reach. That man was already dying when he filed the last form. His hands were shaking and he filed it anyway. Ruth's hands aren't shaking now. They're steady. The tarnished brass compass on its leather cord presses against her sternum through the cream Henley, and her breathing is even, and she pulls the second drawer open. Manila envelopes, each one labeled with a year in Walter's handwriting, 2004, 2005, 2006, all the way through 2021, but the last three are in that same blue ballpoint. HP finished what Walter started. Inside each envelope, a letter from Walter to Ruth, one per year. Never mailed, never mentioned. 18 letters spanning 18 years, written aboard the Clara Dawn during his visits, explaining what he was doing and why. The early ones are practical. Legal strategy, trust mechanics, statute references, the dry language of a man building a wall one brick at a time and documenting every brick. But the later letters, the ones from 2015 onward, those shift. The handwriting gets looser, the sentences get longer, the man behind the strategy starts bleeding through. 2017. Kevin came to see me last month. He wants me to sign over the house. I told him the house is yours. He said, "You don't need a house that big." I said that's not his decision. He didn't like that. Ruthie, I'm starting to see things I don't want to see. Yeah. Things he didn't want to see. His own son measuring the rooms while his mother was still living in them. 2019. The last letter Walter wrote. The handwriting trembles at the edges of every word, the pen pressed hard like he was anchoring himself to the page. I'm sick, and I know it. I can feel it in my hands. They shake now when I try to write. The trust is fully funded. The boat is in your name. Dale knows. HP knows. If I don't make it back here, they'll make sure you find this. I love you the way this boat loves the water. Even when it's not touching it, it remembers. Ruth reads it 3 times. She holds the letter against her chest, both hands flat over it, the way you'd hold a door shut against a storm. Dutch lifts his gray muzzle and puts his chin on her knee, his one upright ear turning toward her breathing. The compass presses harder against her sternum. She can feel the raised edge of its case through the cotton. She folds the letter along its original creases, Walter's hands, and slides it back into the envelope. She does not rush. She is learning her husband for the second time, and this time she is paying attention to everything he never said out loud. Ruth opens the third drawer of the filing cabinet and finds a folder labeled Calloway Family, Kevin and Marjorie, Do Not Forward. Inside are documents that explain not just what her children did, but why they thought they could get away with it. The first page was an email printout dated March 12, 2018, from Kevin Calloway to Marjorie Calloway. Subject line, Mom's Timeline. Let me read you the highlights. Marge, I talked to Feinberg at the Elder Law Firm. He says if we can establish a pattern of declining capacity, we can petition for conservatorship within 18 months. Dad's health is the variable. If he goes first, we move immediately. The house alone appraises at $340,000. The joint savings should be around $95,000 by then. We need to be positioned before she gives it away to one of her causes. Positioned. Like his mother was a stock ticker. Like her life was a quarterly earnings report he needed to get ahead of. And it got worse. Page 2. Marge's reply same day. Kevin, agreed. I've already pulled the POA template from Feinberg's site. I'm predating it 6 months, so it looks like Dad authorized it while he was still lucid. We should also talk about the boat. Dad's obsessed with that thing, but it's worthless. Let it rot. Focus on the liquid assets. Predating a power of attorney. That's not a gray area. That's not aggressive estate planning. That is fraud. Kevin Calloway, sandy hair, side-parted and receding at the temples, slim black leather portfolio tucked under his left arm, standing in some office adjusting his cuff while he plotted to strip his own mother down to nothing. Marge Calloway, thin gold wireframe glasses and that large cream leather handbag with brass clasps gripped in her right hand, cool as a spreadsheet, writing the word pre-dating like it was just another line item. But here's what stopped Ruth's hands mid-page. In the margins, in pencil, Walter's handwriting, small, precise notes, dates he found each document. Intercepted 4/2/18, found printout in Kevin's coat pocket when he left it on the porch chair. And next to Marge's reply about the power of attorney, copy secured, original returned to folder. They don't know I know. Walter knew. He found the emails, he read the plan, and he never said a word to Kevin or Marge, because confrontation would have accelerated their timeline. Instead, he went quiet. He went to work. The next pages in the folder laid out exactly what Walter did. He retitled the Clara Dawn into Ruth's name only, removed himself entirely from the vessel registration, which meant the Ferry couldn't pass through his estate, couldn't be claimed by Kevin as executor, couldn't be touched through probate. Then he filed something called a Heritage Stewardship Designation with the Maine Maritime Heritage Commission. Ruth had never heard of it. Most people haven't. It's an obscure classification that prevents a designated vessel from being sold, scrapped, or removed from its berth without the registered owner's written consent and the Commission's independent approval. Walter had wrapped the Clara Dawn in 3 layers of legal armor that Kevin and Marge didn't even know existed. But Walter couldn't protect everything. The house was joint property. The car was in Walter's name. The savings accounts were joint. And when Walter died in October 2023, Kevin stepped in as executor with the patience of a man who'd been rehearsing for 5 years. He was smooth about it. He was warm. He called Ruth twice a week. He brought groceries once. He said things like, "We just want what's best for you, Mom," while his sister pulled account statements. Then Ruth got pneumonia, January 2024. 3 weeks in the hospital, most of it on oxygen, thin and gray in a bed that wasn't hers, and Kevin moved fast. Emergency power of attorney, citing her incapacity. Marge co-signed. Within 11 days, they liquidated every account they could reach. The house went on the market before Ruth was discharged. She came home to a "for sale" sign in the yard and $211 in an account that used to hold $94,000. The Ferry sat in its gravel lot. Too big to move, too complicated to scrap, too worthless to matter. They forgot about the boat. Thank God they forgot about the boat. 3 days after Ruth moved aboard the Clara Dawn, a man appeared at the base of the gangway. Tall, lean, military straight posture, camel-colored wool topcoat over a white dress shirt and a dark burgundy knit tie, brushed steel wristwatch on his left wrist, a faint birthmark on the right side of his forehead near the hairline. His right hand reached for the worn black ballpoint pen clipped to his inside breast pocket, the way some people touch a rosary. Leon Hargrove. Hargrove Maritime Development. He introduced himself like a man who'd practiced introductions until they felt like friendship. He'd been watching the Clara Dawn parcel for 2 years, he said. Mixed-use marina, boutique slips, a restaurant, seasonal retail. His offer? $85,000 for the vessel and the lot lease assignment. He said it gently. "Mrs. Calloway, I know what you've been through. I'm not here to take advantage. $85,000 is more than this boat is worth to anyone on Earth. It would set you up. A warm apartment, groceries for years. You deserve that." And damn it, he wasn't wrong. $85,000 when you have 104 is not an insult. It's a lifeline. The audience should feel the pull of that number because it is real, and it is rational, and it would solve everything. Ruth stood at the top of the gangway, white silver hair in its loose, low bun, the tortoiseshell clip catching pale light, the tarnished brass compass resting against her cream Henley, her pale gray-blue eyes steady on his. 5 words. "The Ferry is not for sale." Leon nodded. He left his card on the gangway railing. He did not argue. Patient men don't need to. Kevin called that evening. He'd heard about the offer, because Leon had contacted him first, assuming the son had authority. Kevin's voicemail played twice through the Clara Dawn's galley, while Ruth stood with her hand on the counter. "Mom, just sign the release and this all goes away. $85,000. You can get a nice place in Brewer. Marge and I just want what's best for you." Just want what's best for you. The same phrase he used while draining her savings. The same warmth, the same cadence, the same absolute confidence that she would fold because she had always been quiet, and quiet people are supposed to be easy. Ruth listened to the voicemail twice. She did not call back. And now it is 2 a.m. in the captain's quarters. Dutch is asleep on the cot, his gray muzzle on the wool blanket, one ear upright, the other folded forward. The propane heater ticks. Kevin's business card sits on the galley counter. Ruth's phone is in her hand. $104.27 in checking, minus the next water jug, $3.49, minus crackers, $1.25, minus the gas station coffee she allows herself once a day, $2.15, $97.38. The propane runs out in 4 days. A refill is $38. That leaves $59.38. After that, she has no plan. Leon's $85,000 would solve everything. Kevin's voice on the voicemail sounds reasonable. She could call, she could sign, she could be warm. Her thumb hovers over the call button. And this is the moment. This is where the math eats you alive. $59.38 against a Maine winter on a dead ferry. She is 72 years old and her children sold her life out from under her, and the only person who ever protected her is dead, and the dog is the only living thing that chose to stay. Then she sees it. On the corkboard in cabin 7, she'd walked past it a dozen times, too focused on the filing cabinet to study it closely. Pinned in the lower right corner, behind a tide chart from 2019, a sealed envelope. On the front, in Walter's handwriting, the letters small and deliberate. For Ruth, when the night is longest. Her hands are shaking as she pulls the pushpin. The envelope is light. Inside, a single index card. Walter's pencil, pressed hard enough to leave grooves she can feel with her fingertip. Ruthie, the trust is real. The boat is yours. Don't let them move it. Don't let them move you. You were always the captain. I just kept the engine running. Walt. She pressed the heel of her hand against her eyes until the pressure steadied her. Then she put the phone down. She folded Kevin's business card in half and dropped it in the trash. The doubt burned away like a wick catching. Ruth is alone at 2 a.m. in the captain's quarters, Dutch asleep on the cot, Kevin's business card on the galley counter with a number and a voicemail that said, "Mom, just sign the release and this all goes away." Her phone is in her hand. Her thumb is on the call button. The math doesn't work and she knows it. The propane heater ticked. That was the only sound in the captain's quarters at 2 in the morning. That soft, mechanical tick, like a metronome counting down something Ruth couldn't name. Dutch lay on the cot beside her, his gray muzzle resting on the wool blanket, his folded ear twitching once in whatever dream carried him. The faded black and tan coat rose and fell with each slow breath. He'd chosen to stay. He was the only one. Ruth sat on the edge of the cot, her boots still on, the tarnished brass compass resting against the collar of her cream Henley. Her phone was in her right hand. Kevin's business card sat on the galley counter 3 feet away, cream-colored cardstock, embossed, the kind of card that costs more to print than she'd spent on food this week. His voicemail was still saved. She'd listened to it twice already, the way you press on a bruise just to confirm it still hurts. "Mom, just sign the release and this all goes away." That's what her son said, not, "I love you," not, "Are you warm enough?" not, "Do you need anything?" Just sign the release, this all goes away. Like she was a problem, like she was a line item on a spreadsheet tucked inside that slim black leather portfolio he carried under his left arm everywhere he went, the one that made him look like a man who'd figured out how money worked and decided the rest of the world was too stupid to follow. Her thumb sat on the call button. She didn't press it. Not yet. Here's the math. And I need you to sit with this, because this is where the story either breaks a person or it doesn't. Ruth had $104, $27 in her checking account. That's it. That's the whole number. The next water jug from the hardware store was $3.49. The next pack of crackers was $1.25. The gas station coffee she allowed herself once a day, not because she needed it, but because it was the last small kindness she could still afford to give herself, was $2.15. That brought her to $97.38. The propane heater would run out in 4 days. A refill was $38. That left $59.38. After that, she had no plan. No pension she could access. No savings. Kevin and Marge hadn't already picked clean during the divorce settlement they'd helped orchestrate with their father. No safety net. No floor beneath the floor. $59.38 against a Maine winter on a dead boat. Leon Hargrove's offer was $85,000. $85,000. For a woman with $59 to her name, that number might as well be the sun. It would solve everything. A warm apartment, groceries that weren't crackers, a doctor's visit she'd been putting off for 3 months because the copay alone would eat a week of food. Leon was smooth and reasonable, and his brushed steel wristwatch caught the light when he gestured, and his offer made sense by every measure the world uses to define sense. Kevin's voicemail made sense too. That was the worst part. It sounded like concern. It sounded like a son who wanted his mother to stop suffering. It sounded rational. And if you didn't know that Kevin had helped his father liquidate her retirement account, if you didn't know that Marge had stood in a courtroom with her thin gold wireframe glasses and her cream leather handbag and testified that Ruth was not of sound mind to manage her own affairs, if you didn't know those things, you'd think the voicemail was love. It wasn't love. It was cleanup. Ruth's thumb moved a millimeter closer to the button. The heater ticked. Dutch shifted on the blanket. The cold pressed against the hull like something alive, something patient, something that knew how to wait. And this is the moment. This is where the math eats you alive. $59.38 against a Maine winter on a dead boat. She's 72 years old, and her children sold her life out from under her, and the only person who ever protected her has been dead for 14 months, and the dog is the only living thing that chose to stay. She almost called. She was one breath away from it. Her index finger had already curled around the phone's edge, steadying it the way you steady a thing you're about to use. The screen glowed against her face. The number was right there. Then she looked up. Cabin 7's corkboard was visible through the open doorway, the same corkboard she'd walked past a dozen times, the one covered in tide charts and weather clippings and harbor schedules pinned with brass tacks gone green with age. She'd been so focused on the filing cabinet, on the journals, on the photographs, that she'd treated the corkboard like wallpaper, background noise, scenery. But now, at 2 a.m, with the propane heater ticking and the phone glowing in her hand, and $59 standing between her and nothing, now she saw it. Lower right corner, behind a tide chart for August 2019. A sealed envelope, the cream-colored kind you buy at a stationery store, pinned with a single brass tack. On the front, in handwriting she would have recognized blindfolded, in handwriting that had signed every birthday card hidden in the walls of this vessel, in Walter's handwriting, for Ruth, when the night is longest. She stood up. Dutch lifted his head. She crossed the 3 steps to the corkboard and pulled the tack out with her thumbnail, and the envelope came free with a whisper of old paper against cork. Inside, a single index card, white, unlined. Walter's writing, steady and small, the letters leaning slightly right the way they always had. Ruthie, the trust is real. The boat is yours. Don't let them move it. Don't let them move you. You were always the captain. I just kept the engine running. Walt. Ruth pressed the heel of her hand against her eyes until the pressure steadied her. She stood like that for a long time. The compass on its leather cord swung gently against her chest. Dutch watched her from the cot, his one upright ear turned toward her, patient and still. She walked back to the galley counter. She picked up Kevin's business card, that expensive, embossed little rectangle, and folded it in half. then in half again. She dropped it in the trash bin beneath the counter. It made no sound when it landed. The phone went back in her jacket pocket, screen dark. The doubt burned away like a wick catching. The propane heater ticked. That was the only sound in the captain's quarters at 2 in the morning. That small mechanical click every 11 seconds, the flame inside its ceramic grate burning low and blue, and the wind pressing against the hull of the Deliverance like a hand testing a door. Ruth sat on the edge of the cot. Her boots were still on. The faded olive-green field jacket was zipped to her sternum, the tarnished brass compass resting against the cream Henley beneath it. Her white-silver hair had come loose from the tortoiseshell clip on one side, a thin strand falling along the faint birthmark on her neck. She didn't push it back. She wasn't moving at all. Dutch was asleep at her feet, his gray muzzle resting on the folded wool blanket, his one upright ear twitching at nothing. His ribs rose and fell in a slow, patient rhythm. He'd eaten the last of the kibble she'd bought 3 days ago. She'd need more by Thursday. On the galley counter, 6 feet away, Kevin's business card sat where she'd left it. Cream cardstock, embossed navy lettering, Kevin R. Calloway, Esquire, followed by a Portland number and an email address she'd never use. Next to it, her phone, screen dark, one voicemail she hadn't deleted. She picked up the phone. The screen lit her face, pale gray-blue eyes, the scatter of freckles across her nose and cheeks, the fine age lines deepened by the blue glow. She opened the banking app. The number stared back at her like a verdict. $104.27. She did the math. She always did the math. The next water jug from the gas station on Route 1, $3.49. The next pack of saltine crackers, $1.25. The gas station coffee she allowed herself once a day, the one small luxury she hadn't cut, the thing that made her feel like a person instead of a problem, $2.15. That left $97.38. The propane heater, the only thing between her and a Maine night that would freeze the condensation on the inside of the portholes, would run dry in 4 days. A refill was $38. That left $59.38. After that, she had no plan. And this is the moment. I need you to sit with this one. This is where the math eats you alive. $59.38 against a Maine winter on a dead ferry. She's 72 years old. Her son sold her apartment out from under her while she was still signing the papers he told her were medical forms. Her daughter watched it happen and said nothing, just stood there with that cream leather handbag gripped in her right hand, head tilted, measuring. The only person who ever protected her has been dead for 9 months, and the dog sleeping at her feet is the only living thing on this earth that chose to stay. Leon Hargrove's offer was $85,000. $85,000. That's warmth. That's food. That's a small apartment in Ellsworth with heat that works, and a door that locks, and groceries in the refrigerator, and never doing this math again. His voice on the phone had been steady, reasonable, almost kind. Cool blue-gray eyes you could hear through the receiver, that military straight posture audible in every measured word. "I'm not trying to take anything from you, Mrs. Calloway. I'm trying to give you a way out." And the hell of it is, he meant it. He genuinely believed he was being generous. Kevin's voicemail was worse, because Kevin didn't sound like a lawyer. He sounded like her son. "Mom, I know we haven't... Look, I just think if you'd let me explain the offer, you'd see it makes sense. For everyone. You can't stay on that boat, you know that." His voice cracking on the last 2 words, and you almost buy it. You almost forget this is the same man who slid a power of attorney form across a hospital table and told his 72-year-old mother it was a pharmacy release. Almost. Ruth's thumb hovered over the call button, the green icon. 1 tap, 1 conversation. She could sign. She could be warm. The heater ticked. Dutch shifted in his sleep, his folded ear pressing flat against the blanket. Then she looked up. Not at the phone, not at the card, at the corkboard in cabin 7, visible through the open doorway. The one she'd walked past 40 times in the last week. The one covered in tide charts and marina receipts and faded Coast Guard bulletins she'd been too focused on the filing cabinet to study closely. The lower right corner, behind a yellowed tide chart for Penobscot Bay, autumn 1998, pinned at an angle that hid what was beneath it. A sealed envelope. She stood. The cot creaked. Dutch lifted his head, watched her with those dark, steady eyes, then lowered it again. He knew. Dogs always know when someone is walking toward something instead of away from it. She crossed the passageway in 4 steps. Her fingers found the pushpin. The tide chart came away with a dry whisper of old paper. Behind it, thumbtacked to the cork at a careful angle, a white envelope gone ivory with age. On the front, in handwriting she knew better than her own, Walter's neat, slightly forward-leaning script, the kind they taught in schools that don't exist anymore. For Ruth, when the night is longest. Her hands shook. The compass shifted against her collarbone. She pulled the envelope free, turned it over, slid her thumb under the seal. The glue gave without resistance, as if it had been waiting. Inside, a single index card, lined, blue ink. Ruthie, the trust is real. The boat is yours. Don't let them move it. Don't let them move you. You were always the captain. I just kept the engine running. Walt. She read it 3 times. 4. Her throat closed on the 5th. She pressed the heel of her hand against her eyes until the pressure steadied her, until the words stopped swimming, until the cabin came back into focus. The cold iron walls, the corkboard, the tide chart curling on the floor, Dutch watching from the doorway with his gray muzzle low and his one good ear standing straight. She walked back to the galley counter. She picked up Kevin's business card, cream cardstock, embossed navy lettering, the name of a son who couldn't look at her without calculating what she was worth in liquid assets. She folded it in half, then in half again. She dropped it in the trash bin beneath the counter, where it landed on coffee grounds and an empty cracker sleeve. The phone went back on the counter, screen down. The doubt didn't fade. It burned away, like a wick catching, like a flame finding fuel in a room everyone else had written off as empty. She sat back down on the cot. Dutch resettled his muzzle on her boot. The heater ticked. $59.38. A dead ferry in a Maine harbor. An index card in her hand that weighed more than every contract Leon Hargrove had ever drafted. 2 in the morning. The propane heater ticked like a metronome counting down something Ruth didn't want to name. Dutch lay on the wool blanket at the foot of the cot, his gray muzzle resting between his paws, one ear folded forward, the other standing at half attention even in sleep. His ribs rose and fell, steady, patient. The only living thing in that captain's quarters that wasn't doing math. But Ruth was doing math. She sat on the edge of the cot, her boots still on, the faded olive-green field jacket zipped to her sternum. The tarnished brass compass rested against her collar, catching the blue pilot light from the heater. Her phone was in her hand. The screen glowed. $104, $27 in checking. She'd looked 3 times in the last hour, like the number might change if she caught it off guard. It didn't. Water jug tomorrow. $3.49. That pack of saltines she'd been rationing? $1.25. The gas station coffee she allowed herself once a day, because without it she'd stop moving? $2.15. That left $97.38. The propane tank would empty in 4 days. She could hear it in the way the heater sputtered every 9 minutes, a little hitch in the flame like a heart skipping. A refill was $38. That left $59.38. After that, she had no plan, no next number, no next step. Just the cold and the boat and the dark Atlantic grinding against the hull like it was trying to remind her what alone sounded like. Kevin's business card sat on the galley counter. Cream-colored cardstock, embossed lettering. She could see it from the cot. Kevin Calloway, Asset Management. His slim black leather portfolio, his polished brown loafers, his weak, rounded chin lifted like he was daring the world to notice he was compensating. His voicemail was still on her phone. She'd listened to it twice. His voice was calm, measured, almost gentle. The way you talk to someone you've already decided is too old to understand what's happening to them. "Mom, I know this is hard, but the offer from Leon is real. $85,000. You could get an apartment, a warm one. You could stop doing this to yourself." Stop doing this to yourself. Like she'd chosen any of it. Like she'd woken up one morning at 72 and said, "You know what sounds fun? Let me lose my house, my savings, my marriage to a man who measured love in quarterly returns and end up on a dead ferry in Harwick, Maine, with a dog I didn't ask for and a filing cabinet full of a dead man's secrets. Like this was a hobby." Leon's $85,000 would solve everything. New apartment in Portland, heat that worked, a grocery store within walking distance. She could be warm. She could be safe. She could sign one piece of paper and walk away from Walter Calloway's legacy like it was somebody else's problem. Her thumb hovered over the call button. And this is the moment. Right here. This is where the math eats you alive. $59. 38 against a Maine winter on a dead boat. She's 72 years old, and her children sold her life out from under her, and the only person who ever quietly, invisibly, stubbornly protected her is dead and buried in a cemetery she hasn't found yet, and the dog, the old gray-muzzled dog with ribs showing through his dull coat, is the only living thing that chose to stay. Her thumb didn't move, but it didn't pull away either. Then she saw it. Cabin 7. She'd spent hours in there with the filing cabinet, pulling folders, reading names, tracing the geography of Walter's invisible generosity across 50 years and 237 lives. But the corkboard, the one above the writing desk, layered with tide charts and marina receipts, and a faded photograph of Dutch as a younger dog standing on the foredeck, she hadn't studied the corners. Not closely. Not the lower right, where a tide chart from August 2019 was pinned over something underneath. She crossed the passageway. Her boots were quiet on the steel deck. Dutch lifted his head, watched her go, put it back down. He knew. She pulled the tide chart aside, a sealed envelope, cream-colored, slightly yellowed at the edges. On the front, in Walter's handwriting, that same careful block lettering she'd been reading for days in ledgers and birthday cards and court documents, 5 words. For Ruth, when the night is longest. Her hands shook. The birthmark on the left side of her neck, just below her ear, pulses with her heartbeat. She could feel it. She pressed the heel of her hand against her eyes until the pressure steadied her. Then she opened the envelope. Inside, a single index card. Lined. The ink was blue ballpoint, pressed hard enough to leave grooves she could feel with her fingertip. Ruthie, the trust is real. The boat is yours. Don't let them move it. Don't let them move you. You were always the captain. I just kept the engine running. Walt. She read it 4 times. She read it standing in the dark passageway of a dead ferry at 2 a.m. with $104. $27 in her checking account, and no plan and no heat in 4 days, and a son who thought she was senile, and a daughter who thought she was stubborn, and a developer who thought she was a problem to be solved with a check and a handshake. She read it a 5th time. Then she walked back to the galley. She picked up Kevin's business card. Kevin Calloway, Asset Management, that embossed lettering, that cream cardstock, and she folded it in half, slowly, deliberately, the way you fold something you never intend to open again. She dropped it in the trash. The phone went dark. She set it face down on the counter. Dutch padded in from the captain's quarters, his nails clicking on the steel deck, and pressed his gray muzzle against her knee. She put her hand on his head. The compass shifted against her collarbone. The propane heater ticked. The harbor moved against the hull. Somewhere out past the breakwater, a channel marker blinked green, then dark, then green. The doubt burned away like a wick catching. And if you've made it this far, stay with me. Because what Ruth does next, with $59, $38, and a dead man's index card, and a dog who won't leave, that's the part I've been waiting to tell you. The light is still on, the door is open, and nobody's signing a damn thing.